The story begins as Humbert, a European intelligent man, comes to a small American town to teach French literature at a college. He is overcome by a sense of longing and anxiety as he remembers his first love as a teenager, which tragically ended. This event has left a deep imprint on his life, and he now feels that his attraction is directed not to adult women but to teenage girls. Humbert settles in the house of the widow Charlotte Gaze, in a small cozy room on the second floor. Charlotte is a middle-aged woman, full of life and energy, but somewhat obsessive and frivolous. She immediately takes an interest in Humbert, seeing in him a man of refinement and culture, which she lacked in her life. Humbert, however, is not at all interested in Charlotte. His attention is instantly drawn to Charlotte's daughter, a 12-year-old girl named Dolores, whom everyone affectionately calls Lolita. Lolita is the living embodiment of his secret desires. She is flirty, unruly, carefree, and despite her young age, has a strange and unconscious sexuality, which does not leave Humbert indifferent. He begins an internal struggle with his feelings, realizing that what he feels is immoral and destructive. Despite this, Humbert decides to stay at Charlotte's house, convincing himself that he can control his feelings. He tries to spend more time with Lolita, accompanying her to school, walking with her around town, or just being around her when she plays. Lolita, in turn, is drawn to Humbert, seeing him as a kind of older friend she can trust. Soon Charlotte begins to suspect that her daughter is spending too much time with Humbert, and her jealousy of Lolita becomes more and more apparent. Charlotte gradually realizes that she is in love with Humbert. She decides to confess her feelings to him by writing him a letter. However, Humbert remains indifferent to her feelings, but sees this as an opportunity to stay close to Lolita. He agrees to marry Charlotte, although he himself inwardly despises her and continues to dream of Lolita. Sometime after the wedding, Humbert receives an unexpected letter from Charlotte, in which she accidentally learns of his true feelings for Lolita. Filled with rage and terror, she runs out of the house and is hit by a car, dying on the spot. After Charlotte's death, Humbert becomes Lolita's sole guardian. He takes advantage of this to take the girl with him on a trip across the country. He explains to Lolita that her mother has died and they will now live together as a family. During their trip, Humbert becomes more and more immersed in his dark fantasies in an attempt to get closer to Lolita. He buys her gifts, takes her to the movies and promises that they will be happy together. Lolita, not realizing the depth of his feelings, sees it as an exciting adventure, playing his game. Soon Humbert begins to realize that Lolita is no longer the naive girl he used to see her as. She begins to realize her power over him, demanding more and more from him. Their relationship becomes more and more confusing and painful for both of them. Humbert is jealous of the other boys, of her interests, of her growing independence. Lolita, on the other hand, becomes irritated and bored, realizing that her life is completely dependent on Humbert. They continue their journey, changing hotel after hotel, city after city. Humbert tries to control Lolita's every move, preventing her from making friends or being alone with other people. He becomes paranoid, believing that they are being stalked by someone who knows about his secret and wants to take Lolita away from him. Humbert becomes increasingly entangled in his jealousy and fear of losing Lolita. One day they stop at one of the many motels where Lolita suddenly falls ill. Humbert takes her to the local hospital where she is treated. He stays by her side hoping that the illness will recede. One morning, however, he discovers that Lolita has disappeared. In a panic, he begins to look for her, but soon learns that she is left with another man. His world falls apart. A few years later, Humbert accidentally receives a letter from Lolita. She informs him that she has married a young man and now lives with him. She asks Humbert to help her with money, as they are expecting a child and are in a difficult situation. Humbert does not hesitate to go to her, hoping to win her back. When he finally meets Lolita, he sees that she is no longer the girl he loved. In front of him is a grown woman who has lost all the innocence and spontaneity that once attracted him so much. He realizes that his dream of Lolita was an illusion, that he has ruined her life and his own. Humbert offers Lolita to leave with him, but she refuses, choosing to live with her husband despite all the difficulties. In desperation and anger, Humbert decides to take revenge on the man who stole Lolita from him. He finds him and kills him. After this, Humbert feels that his life has finally lost its meaning. The police find him and he is brought to trial for his crimes. After killing the man who stole Lolita from him, Humbert realizes the gravity of what he has done. He feels he has made an irreparable mistake, but it is too late. His mind flashes through a kaleidoscope of images of Lolita, her innocent laughter, their trips across the country, moments of intimacy and quarrels. All of this now seems like a delirious nightmare, which he himself created and from which there is no way out. Humbert no longer sees the meaning in his life, he has lost everything he aspired to. Life with Lolita, which once seemed to him the only meaning of existence, now lies in ruins. Humbert doesn't try to escape or hide from the consequences of his actions. He realizes that there is no going back, and from this there is a strange sense of relief inside him. The police find him without resistance and he is brought to trial for murder. In court, Humbert does not try to justify himself. He feels no fear or regret, only deep fatigue and emptiness. He is accused of murder in cold blood and the court passes a harsh sentence. He is to spend the rest of his life in prison. While behind bars, Humbert begins to write his memoirs. He describes in detail everything that happened to him and Lolita, their meeting, their relationship, their travels, and finally the tragic ending. He tries to understand what it was that brought him to this point. Writing becomes for him a kind of confession, a way to free his soul from the weight of past mistakes. Humbert does not seek sympathy from readers, he just wants to set out his truth, realizing that he will never be able to change what happened. His thoughts become more and more immersed in the memories of Lolita. He now realizes that his love was not true love, but a destructive obsession. He remembers her face, her voice, her childlike directness, but now all this causes him not desire but bitter regret. He realizes that he robbed her of her childhood, broke her life and made her part of his sick fantasies. This realization becomes a heavy burden that he will carry for the rest of his life. One day Humbert receives news of Lolita's death. He learns that she died in childbirth, leaving behind a child. This news shocks him and he realizes that he will never see her again, never hear her voice, never feel her presence. A wave of pain and despair rises inside him, mixed with guilt that is now impossible to drown out. He realizes that the only chance for redemption has been lost, and with this realization comes a complete resignation to the inevitable. Humbert continues to write until the very end. There are no more illusions or attempts to justify his actions in his memoirs. He recognizes that he has ruined both his life and Lolita's, and now all he has to do is accept his fate. His last lines are full of bitterness and regret that his love has turned into a nightmare that has taken lives and left behind only emptiness. In the end, Humbert dies in prison without ever finding forgiveness from himself or others. His story remains in the pages of his memoirs as a warning of what destructive obsession can lead to when one confuses his morbid desires with true love.